we started talking about do more with less, do more with less. There's always this chorus of a encouragement to do more with less resources. But then we turned around and said, how can we do better with less? And I'd like to throw it out to Jason and Rob in terms of what does that mean? What does that mean to you?
I can start. And so I can say that as long as I've been doing this role, especially on the lead gen side, one of the things that we've talked about for years, and especially when I'm working with some of our vendor partners like Nora and yourself, I think when I first joined this industry and started learning about it, one of the things that I realized real early on was it was a numbers game. It was quantity. I remember walking around some of the leads cons, for example, and you would see these shirts that says, I buy as many garbage disposal leads as possible. And they would be on the shirts and the hats. And it was definitely an industry when I first got involved that was focused on more is more and more is better. As we continued, especially because the focus of our association is regulatory and compliance, listening just to the regulators and talking about what they were saying were problematic for them and their concerns, it was very clear that the game of quantity versus quality needed to change. And so I know for as long as I can remember being in this seat, we've been preaching quality over quantity, quality over quantity. Less is more. And I believe we're starting to see a shift in the industry. Whether that's a pull or a push, I don't know, but or a volunteer, I raise my hand to do it. What I can tell you is as a result of maybe all of those, we are seeing more of a focus. Now, whether or not it's actually what we're seeing full scale today, I do know that as the industry continues to mature and navigate through some of these extremely complex regulatory and compliance issues that are facing the industry, I'm seeing finally an acceptance and even an adoption of people who are navigating their back ends to do more with less. And then that becomes a benefit to the consumer because we're not filling the bucket with chum. We're especially like over, and I mentioned to Nora on the ad fraud side of it. If we believe what the numbers are out of Rich and his team over there, it could be 20, 30, 40, 50, even 60% of the leads that are going through the ecosystem could be false or fraudulent. And if that's true, and I do believe that there's some fact behind that, then we must get rid of that chum and focus on those leads that are generated with consent, generated with intent, and generated with some sort of consumer protection mindset behind the scenes. So I've been preaching it. I'm glad to see that the industry's finally adopting it. Once again, I don't know if it's a push or pull, but in general, either way, it works for me. Jason?
And the interesting thing when we started looking at this topic too was I brought this up and said, you know, what I'm seeing a lot from companies across like a crazy wide range of industries, right, and sizes is this mandate of doing more with less on managers and managers who then end up getting let go and terminated because they still can't do more with less. And then what was interesting was Rob then said, well, what about doing better with less instead of just trying to do more and just grinding away at it? And I think that's really important, especially with what you were saying, Rob, is that to do better, right? Not just how do we do more, which then makes people feel, I just got to do numbers game. Let me buy more leads and grind it through a system. And let me buy Convoso, which has really smart intelligence, because let me just overload it with a bunch of crappy data and just try to scorch the earth doing more with less, right? Let me buy worse leads and less opt-in and cheaper stuff, or just abuse my staff and things we'll talk about with the personnel side. But I think that the main focus needs to be better with less, because then that improves the quality, which then, like you said, Rob, it's quality over quantity.
For a higher conversion rate. When I first started, I think, and I admit this may be a fiction, I have no idea, but I don't work in a shop, but I remember hearing like 1.5% to 2% conversions. 2 out of 100 is an acceptable conversion. And I think that when you hear that kind of threshold, it's definitely built on a quantity versus quality model, right? And so, yes, maybe the cost per is lower, but what is the real cost of servicing that entire database across the period of time, from a financial side and from a compliance risk side of things as well?
And certainly what we're seeing from our side is that lead costs may be going up, but people are then going to be focusing. We've always been a proponent of buy less leads and more intelligently work the leads that you have paid for. And that's going to lower your overall CPA. But we're increasingly seeing that people making sure they've got the analytics to really focus on the fewer leads that they do buy, the fewer, more high quality leads that they do purchase, and then making sure that they've got the analytics in place to really track, are they getting the most of it? How should they be working it? And evaluating what's our ROI by lead source, by list vendor, and that sort of thing, to make those smart decisions and not just throw more spaghetti at the wall.
I think the big key is, because we're talking about strategies here, right? Not just theories and not just what our hope is for the ecosystem and in the industries, but strategies wise, it's what are the key demographics of those leads that you need to buy? Who's a good fit? Reverse engineering your last batch of enrollments and figure out what might be in common and buy more of those. That seems like common sense, but so many companies just fall into the trap of, let me just buy these 10,000 leads, feed them into the machine, right? Instead of, how do I get the right people? And we'll talk about personnel, we'll talk about the and retention on that side, but I think it's so important to focus on how to buying the right leads, the right data, and then also getting the right type of data running through a system, let's say like Convoso, that your team is good at dealing with. Some teams are built around inbound, some are outbound, some are outbounding on web forms, some co-reg type stuff that's a TCPA compliant. So you got to know what your shop is good at and then just feed them the quality that works.